Hello, everybody. This is the last talk in track number 2 for today. And welcome, everybody. And I'm pleased to introduce somebody who most of you already know very well, Sally Kleinfeldt from Jazz Carta fame. She's here to talk to us about collaborating with Orchid data. Take it away, Sally.
Okay, thank you, Fulvio. All right, I'd like to start by just saying a word about why I'm giving this talk, because this talk is about a very simple site. No new technical innovations that might be of interest to developers. But it's a really perfect example, I thought, of the kind of thing that Plone is really good at, and how Plone can be a really great solution for organizations with small budgets. Kind of a case study of a system or a website that is a perfect match for Plone's capabilities. Let me just hang on here. We also found this a really rewarding site to develop for the developers who were Alec Mitchell and Jesse Snyder. It was really refreshing instead of these huge sites that require a lot of customization and complexity. And oh my gosh, if it's a site that's 5-10 years old, you're really struggling with historical things that you've developed and trying to work with that. This was a fresh start, simple site that was just really a pleasure, I think, for them to develop, because everything just went exactly as according to plan. And for me, it was a real pleasure also because of my interest in the problem domain. Some of you know, before becoming a Python developer, I was an ecologist and a botanist. So this was a project that was really fun for us. All right, I'll start off by describing NAOCC, the organization that the site was developed for. So NAOCC stands for the North American Orchid Conservation Center. And it's a coalition of organizations that you see pictured here, dedicated to conserving North America's diverse orchid heritage. So NAOCC fosters and supports efforts to preserve orchid habitats. They work to restore orchid populations, native orchids where their populations have declined. And they promote public interest in orchids and their preservation through outreach and various educational programs. One such educational resource that NAOCC has created is the Go Orchids plant identification site, which fosters an interest in orchids and empowers citizen scientists to identify them and learn more about them. Jazz Carta developed Go Orchids in 2013. It was cloned from the open source Go Botany site, which we had developed for the Native Plant Trust as part of a large NSF grant. So these are very specifically plant identification systems. And both Go Botany and Go Orchids are built in Django. So NAOCC also has a field work and laboratory work side. This is a poster or a diagram of the life cycle of orchids, and NAOCC is developing national collections of orchid seeds and the symbiotic fungi that orchids require to grow, which are going to be available to support conservation efforts. So the collections are managed at a number of different collaborating institutions, and lots of data is recorded for each sample that is collected. And this is the relevant side of NAOCC as far as this project is concerned. second. Okay, so let's talk about the capabilities that NAOCC needed for this site. Put simply, they needed a system to manage all the information that was in their orchid samples. So, they had originally started capturing their data in a spreadsheet, recording all this sample information, but they had outgrown that. As you can imagine, this was a lot of data to shoehorn into this sort of simple solution. And they needed a system that could capture data about each sample as it went through their process. First, data from the field about the orchid's habitat, population, many other details. Then data from the lab, the results of seed propagation, fungal cultures, where the samples and cultures are stored, etc. But the data management system was not all that they needed. They also needed collaboration features so that people from partner organizations could contribute and disseminate information about meetings, research, etc., and could also contribute the data to the system about the orchid samples. So here's some of the specific collaboration features that they actually needed. The collaborators had to be able to enter information about the samples and submit them for review. The admins in the system had to review the sample data and publish it so that the collaborators could see some but not all of it. Anonymous users, on the other hand, should not be able to see sample data at all. So in Plone terms, what they needed were roles, workflows, and protected data fields. And in addition to supporting this kind of collaboration on sample data, the system also needed to support general collaboration features, such as sharing documents and posting news items and events for their community of collaborators and partners. And that data, sample data, and general collaboration features had to share a common access control structure. And to top it off, although they needed quite a bit of functionality, the budget available for the project was minimal, pennies, as this slide is trying to convey. All right. So why did we think Plone was a good fit? Well, NAOCC staff were already familiar with Django from their experiences with Go Orchids. And like many scientists, they were also familiar with relational databases. So they were kind of expecting us to propose some sort of web database like Django. But in fact, Plone made much more sense. So all the collaboration requirements that NAOCC had came out of the box with Plone and required only minimal customization. So member roles, workflows, fine-grained placeful access control, permission-sensitive search, collections, which could be used for making reports. All these things are the kinds of things that Plone is great at, and that just came with Plone. The sample management, on the other hand, capabilities were quite easy to use by adding a custom content type to capture the sample data. So a sample content type with lots of different fields of many different types, geolocations needed to be available, widgets to enter that, lots of vocabularies, and a folderish structure to these sample data objects that could contain images, files, fungal analyses, that kind of thing. So whereas if we had started with a web database like Django and added the necessary collaboration features, that would have been expensive. But starting with Plone and adding custom content types and workflow was easy. Okay, so we did a brief discovery phase to define the needed features in more detail. We used a spreadsheet to define in detail this custom content type that we needed for samples, with lots of columns that defined the detailed information about each field, for example, its name, help text, the type, the vocabulary, whether it should be searchable, etc. And that content type definition included specifying what data fields are highly sensitive and can only be seen by admins. For example, given that some orchid species are rare and endangered, the locations that the samples came from must be hidden to anyone except the admins. We mocked up a simple custom view for the sample content type, just using a Google Doc, something that the developers could work from. The out-of-the-box dexterity view is pretty useless, so that was something we felt we had to do. Okay, I have just realized the reason I'm stumbling here is that I had actually started presentation mode earlier before I did this talk, and then I edited the talk. And I'm getting the old talk, so I'm going to unshare my screen and then share my screen again. And I apologize for that, folks, but that's the way it's got to be. Stop sharing. So hello, this is me in person. I'm going to get out of this presentation mode, and I'm going to get into the presentation mode that I actually want to be on. I had no idea that Google Slides would not just catch your latest changes if you started presentation mode earlier, but obviously it doesn't. So anyway, here we are at the place that I actually want to be. And I'm going to share my screen again. See, I told you, Fulvio, I am no good at this. Okay.
You're doing great.
I'm doing what? I think it's this one, but yeah. Okay. I am actually ahead of where I want to be. Okay. So I talked about the custom content type that we mocked up a view for, and we also defined a custom workflow that we needed for samples and other collaborator content similar to the normal Plone workflow, but so like the normal three-state, draft, submit, and published workflow. But in this case, the published items are invisible to anonymous at all times, never visible to anonymous, partially visible to collaborators, and fully visible to the admin and the owner. Okay, so that's the lead up to discovery of what we needed to do. And here's just a brief tour of the implementation. Okay, and let's see, I want to see the chat. Okay, great. So for the implementation, first we created the collaborator role, which was like a slightly specialized member. And then we created the custom workflow using that role that will be used on samples and any other type of content that would have the same visibility constraints as the sample data. content that, when published, would only be visible to people with the Collaborator role. We customized the out-of-the-box Barceloneta theme through the web, adding the NAOK logo and colors. We did not have the budget to do a custom theme. Barceloneta was straightforward, has good mobile responsiveness, so that suited our purposes. We wanted to make sure that people could use the site on mobile devices in the field, including for data entry in the field, and Barceloneta allowed that, and Plone's nice mobily responsive editing UI allowed that, so great. We also created a skeleton site structure with kind of high-level directories where the samples would go, reports, and a general collaboration area. This is looking at the site as an anonymous user. And here you see the same page logged in. And now you see those top-level folders for samples and collaboration. We implemented this by setting up placeful workflow on these collaborator-only parts of the site. Placeful workflows can be set up by clicking policy on the state menu. And you get a form that looks like this, and you can specify what workflow to use in that section of the site. And of course, we implemented this sample content type. Here's an example of one being viewed by an admin. It's a pretty big beast with a lot of tabs on the data on the edit screen for entering 50 plus, actually almost 60 fields of data, including geolocation data via a geolocation widget. Some of those fields, like geolocation, are restricted and can only be viewed by admins. Like I say, this is a picture of it from an admin mode. The samples, as I said, are folderish and can contain regular Plone images and files. So people can upload photos of the orchids that they've taken in the field and other PDFs or Word documents or whatever they're capturing about information about the orchid as it moves through their process. And we also created another fairly simple content type called fungal information, which can be held within the samples. So this was sort of a page-like content type that we developed to hold the results of fungal analyses, including DNA analysis and the genus and species of the fungus, if known. Usually these species are unknown, but it has fields for that. This fungal information content type also has a field for internal notes that can only be seen by admins. So this idea of allowing the staff of NAOC to really, have all this in-depth information that's not necessarily available to all the collaborators is a continuing theme here. We also set up search indexes for many of the sample metadata fields to allow searching and filtering on that information. Most importantly, this allows NAOC to create collections that can serve as reports on the sample management data. We even called them reports in the UI, but they're just normal collections. And we made some examples to demonstrate the possibilities and serve as templates so that NAOC could create more. And here's what the all Cypripedium samples report, AKA collection, looks like. We use tabular views on the reports to display the data of interest, and also that, of course, links to the individual samples. We also created a CSV export that can be used on collections. Here you see it on the actions menu. This is so staff can download the report data and do further analyses. We also created a CSV import of samples, which will, right, I was going to just explain a little bit more about the export. The export behavior is to export whatever data fields have been defined as the table columns on the collection into a CSV file, and that allows staff to to define what fields they want to see so that they can export them for the further analysis. Right, and then we also created a CSV import of the sample data. I mentioned that the staff had already started to capture their data in spreadsheets, so they had, a fair number, hundreds of sample data items already captured and needed to get them into the system. So so we created an importer that would allow them to do that. Okay, so summing up our main lessons learned from this project, Plone was definitely a big win for this use case. It allowed us to create a robust, secure, highly functional, and specialized site in very little time. As I said, Alec and Jesse really enjoyed developing the project. They were never fighting the framework, but always taking advantage of it to create what was needed. And that could be done quite efficiently and quickly with just using straight up Plone best practices. Not surprisingly, the CSV import was the most time-consuming item to develop because it required just a lot of back and forth, trial and error, finding clever ways to parse things in different formats. You can just kind of imagine NAOC themselves had to put some effort into massaging the data in their existing spreadsheets so that it was consistent and importable. So that was, a not unexpected, but definitely time-consuming part of the project. Everything else was really quite smooth. Finally, I just want to say thank you to a big thank you to NAOC and their director, Dennis Wiggum, for funding this because they agreed to fund this as an open source project so that we could share a sort of pre-configured Plone site with a sample, custom content type, literally an example that is a sample, with other organizations that might want a similar sort of collaboration plus data management system for any kind of scientific or research purposes that it might match. Also wanted to shout out to Julianne McGinnis, the data massager extraordinaire, who answered millions of questions from us and provided many iterations of sample data for us to try our imports and on. And also to Alec and Jesse, who did such a great job developing the site in such a smooth and efficient manner. So thank you to all of you. And now opening it up for questions.
All right, thank you, Sally. That was great.
Well, Rocky. Maybe I should stop sharing.
Okay, let's see. Are there any questions in Slido that we can address right now? No, I don't see any. So I've already shared the Jitsi link in the Slack channel for track 2, but if you want to just click the join face-to-face button, the blue button down below the video window in Loudswarm, you will also get to the Jitsi room where Sally will join you now. Thank you so much, Sally.
Okay, thanks, Fulvio. Bye,
Bye.
everybody. See you tomorrow.